What's up, everyone? I'm Ben Amo, and you're listening to the Auricle Podcast, where your stories matter.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Auricle Podcast. Today on the show we have Pastor Rhoda, who is a pastor at Oakridge Adventist Church in British Columbia. Pastor Ben is interviewing her, and she has an amazing story to share. We hope that you are inspired by how God has changed her life. Just stay tuned, and we hope that you enjoy the show.
This is Rhoda Klein-Miller, and I am a pastor at Oakridge Adventist Church in Vancouver.
Yeah, and where are you born and raised? Like, where are you from?
I was born and raised in between the tiny town of Oliver, British Columbia, and Okanagan Falls, British Columbia. And so I was raised in the middle of the Okanagan Valley. Fun fact, the narrowest point of the Okanagan Valley. In between McIntyre Bluff and Eagle Bluff.
Wow. And so how different is where you were raised to being now in the heart of one of the busiest cities in the nation?
I would have never imagined it. I would have never imagined being like a country hick welfare kid in the country in literally like cactus, rattlesnake infested territory where we had to hike a kilometer just to get to the bus stop to take you into a little tiny town. I would have never in my wildest dreams imagined being in the urban center of British Columbia.
Well, now you're there.
Now I'm there. Yes.
And that's, I think, I admire your ministry at Oakridge. I really do. And you have such a unique church in the sense of just being Vancouver. Mm-hmm. And Vancouver is very unique in comparison to a lot of places in Canada, a lot of places I've been. And so I think to be a pastor in Vancouver is a heavy task.
It's huge. I mean, the city is approaching 700,000 population in the Vancouver city proper limits. We've got 3 churches. We've got 2 ethnic churches, the Chinese church, a Filipino church, super welcoming to other guests, but really, kind of a monoculture theme. And then my church. And it's been an incredible blessing. I always say the strength of my church, our value that we have listed is unity in diversity. So we really lean into this idea that we embrace diversity and we find our unity in Christ. And it is a foretaste of heaven. And I've had people come back into Adventism, newcomers to Adventism, newcomers to Christianity, and even other Christians in the city who come to my church or even just see the bulletin board and pictures of the church family on the wall and say, I have never seen a church like this before. Wow. To me, it's a foretaste of heaven. It's our strongest testimony to the gospel at work is the fact that we are so cultural and multi-generational.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I think that's, I wish that was kind of the goal of so many churches, but I know culture is a very big thing.
It's huge.
And it's so hard to break away from what you're used to. It's hard to worship with people who don't look like you sometimes, or not from the exact same background, but I think to be able to rise above that is an inspiring thing.
I think the gospel can redefine new culture, and I think people are open-minded to see the family be redefined by the gospel and church be redefined by the gospel. They get excited, they catch the vision that you can have 2 cultures, or you can have a hybrid culture. You don't have to let go of your traditions to move into bridging other cultural gaps, and that there is something beautiful in other cultures that you can embrace. So, like, I'm actually 5th generation Canadian on my mom's side, but my dad was an immigrant from Germany in the Second World War. So, firstborn, Canadian on his side. I'm married to an American whose parents immigrated from India, and I have picked up the cuisine because it mattered to me. So I can now cook dosa, idli, curry, sometimes better than his cousins, not to brag, but his mother-in-law will brag about me on that. Just because I've cherished it, I valued it. And so, I think instead of being protectionist about our culture, we can let it stand and make room for other cultural practices and traditions. And the more that we're open to it, the more it can work.
Wow. Yeah, I agree. That's true. Now, I just want to ask you a little bit more about yourself. You're a pastor, as we've just kind of discussed. And we know being a pastor is a strange calling. It's especially strange because it's not usually our first choice. And I think, especially today's day and age, especially with all the controversy, to be called as a pastor as a woman, that's even a harder choice to make because of the obstacles you have to face. Mm-hmm. So how did you end up going into ministry?
Yeah, I didn't realize it would be what it is, actually. I've always done ministry. Like, probably if you asked me in my early career, what's your hobby? I would say it's ministry. Like, it just became what consumed all of my spare time. And it started even in high school, just seeing a need in the kids division at my local church and offering to help, and just being so blessed to see the difference I was making. I literally had a class of 3 kids in the Penticton primary class, but to see how much they appreciated and loved me for just telling them stories about Jesus was so invigorating. And then I went to college and was involved in choir and other ministries, and just nothing felt as fulfilling and meaningful as serving. And I pursued a degree in education, or I thought I would be in natural hazards. I did geography and environmental education. And I landed a really amazing co-op position at Science World. And that turned into a career. I thought, why be a high school teacher where I have to deal with behavioral issues and marking exams when I can just deal with kindergartners to high schoolers in this science center and perfect my craft of facilitation, of presentation, of education, and not deal with all that other, the burdensome part. So I loved my career. I was there for 15 years. But towards the end, I just felt like there wasn't a greater purpose to it. It just felt a little bit shallow for me. And I had been invited to plant a church in North Vancouver with Colin Griffiths, which was another sister church of Creekside. And that was just exciting to plant a church and to see who would come and to just bond with the other people who were so sacrificial to make it happen. I ended up as lead elder, as board chair sometimes, and covering a lot if Colin got sick or on the off weeks where he wasn't there. And then just something moved on my heart that I needed to go to church where I lived. And I was living in Fairview Slopes, Vancouver. Oakridge was literally 10 minutes down Oak Street, but I was commuting 45 minutes in weekend traffic to get to Creekside, and I would show up there just angry about red lights, and I just thought, this is not the spirit of Sabbath. And how do I invite and connect with the people, neighborhood, just neighboring, good neighboring. It just was, it was driving me to make a change. And so my husband and I visited Oakridge. Pastor Manuel Silva was there at the time. He was dying of cancer. And we just, even though it was big and seemingly unfriendly and hard to make connections, I just felt like this is where I need to move my membership. And shortly after we did that, a new pastor came in, Pastor Kumar Dixit, and he invited me after a few months to be his lead elder. And I learned and worked with his elder team and saw how he led the church. And he was looking for, eventually the church was growing and they were looking for an associate pastor. And I remember doing some school visitation or something with him, and he said, "Why don't you apply?" And I was like, that's ridiculous. I had never met a female pastor in the Adventist church. I knew of some, like Elizabeth Talbot from media ministry, but I thought that's what she did, media ministry. I didn't know if she pastored a church. So I'd never met really face-to-face an Adventist female pastor. I didn't think we really had any in our denomination. So I just thought it was impossible. And I said, how would that even work? Like, where would I get training? And I'm not going to stop doing ministry to go to seminary for 2 years and go to school. And he mentioned this Matt Min program, and just to think about it. And that position got filled by someone else. And then a year later, there was another opening again. And I was his lead elder. So I remember sitting in the boardroom at the end of the table, and we discussed some names of who might be interested and who we could approach. And I was looking at the time like, hey, let's call this meeting. We've got our names, we've got our tasks. And Pastor Kumar was like, hey, I've got one more name to add. Like, okay. And he looked at me and he said, I'd like Rhoda to apply. And I literally remember turning like 180 and looking over my shoulder like, which Rhoda is he talking about? and I was just in shock. Like, I'm chairing the search committee for this pastor. Like, what is he talking about? This, again, it seems impossible. And he said, yeah, let's talk. And after the meeting, he said, I really think, because you have lay ministry experience, you should go for this. You should think about it. And I talked to Pastor Colin, who was another one of my mentors who I'd done the church plant with. And he was like, of course, you should apply and just see if God opens the doors. And so at that time, I'd picked up a job. I missed telling you, I picked up a job as school chaplain. So because I felt like something just wasn't fulfilling enough, even though this was like a sweet career. I mean, I was curating incredible exhibits, working with amazing people. Celebrities from Vancouver would be in our center quite often. It was a job that a lot of colleagues vied for, but still, something wasn't enough. So I had actually asked my managers to condense my work week to 4 10-hour days, and I worked Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, 10-hour days, so that I could take a part-time chaplain job at our local Adventist school, and I worked there, Tuesday and Friday. So I was working, 1.5 jobs, and I was loving the chaplaincy thing. I mean, I would show up to school, and I was expected, I'd spend all the night before prepping. It was just driving me. I was so happy and just excited about ministering to these kids, the whole gamut, kindergartners to grade 12. And so, when this vacancy came up at my church, I'd already begun the Matt Min program. I was lucky to get endorsed by the BC Conference for that. And I had just done my first semester, and then one of my first classes was Old Testament studies in Esther. And so this theme of for such a time as this really was resonating with me, that there is no coincidence. God's name is never mentioned in the book of Esther, but there's just this unseen hand, this unseen force that's putting all the dominoes in a row, stacking the cards in the deck. And it's just a matter of saying, yes, if I'm not going to do it, God can raise up somebody else. So the courage of Esther, just to be willing to say yes when the opportunity was at her feet, really just stuck with me. And so I was offered the job as pastor on that second round, and had to say goodbye to the school kids in June and start pastoring in July.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And so let's go into a little deeper into that saying yes thing. Do you think, like, when we say no, like, God still will give us another chance to do the exact same thing?
Oh, definitely. He's the God of second chances, third chances, fourth, fifth chances. But I think puts the brakes on the potential that we have to experience the joy of trusting him, of serving him, like the adventure. It just puts the brakes on the adventure. So of course he's always going to have another opportunity. But I think I am where I am today because I didn't allow room to talk myself out of those opportunities, right? I didn't give myself the chance to really say no, even if those thoughts were coming in my head like, this is impossible, there's no way. I would just pray in faith and say, God, give me the discernment. If I can discern that this is a door, an opportunity that you've opened, that you've created, I'm going to be faithful and say yes. Even if it seems ridiculous to my logical mind, to my scientific mind, I'm going to say yes. And because I said yes to kids ministry, I said yes to taking over the 5-6 division at this camp meeting when, this sweet senior lady had to retire after years of doing it. And there seemed to be nobody else doing it. I've never done a program like that before. I worked with half a dozen kids, at most a classroom full of kids. Camp meeting, you'll get like 80, 120 kids all at once. It's a totally different ball game. I just said yes because it was a need and an opportunity, and I just knew I could help. And that was training ground for a ministry that I'm doing today with adults. It was training ground for a ministry that I did at the school as chaplain. It was training ground in testing my faith. There were a lot of my first and second year this is a volunteer position at camp meeting. Like I would be in tears a couple nights, just so stressed and exhausted. And it was a training ground to develop faith and confidence that God has a calling and a purpose, and even those little things that we do matter.
And what comes before that moment when we say yes? Or what is it that can help us to just say yes to God despite the consequences or despite how illogical it is? How do you prepare for that?
I think, it's kind of a dirty word, but discipline, obedience, just making a commitment, a personal commitment in obeying God's voice when he calls. Because who else am I going to listen to? It's like, and the discipline, the more you kind of are in the routine, the more you take those small leaps of faith, the more you go out of your comfort zone and see that even in a flop or a failure, God still calls you again to do something. Your faith gets stretched and your trust is built, and you can look back, and hindsight's always 20/20, and you go, yeah, that was an adventure, and I'm up for that again. I know that God hasn't failed me yet, really, so I can trust He's got something more in store.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Wow. So then, just if somebody right now is struggling with saying yes, because I think despite how much discipline we need and how much we do need to obey God, we're always faced with that pressure of people saying it doesn't make sense, of ourselves telling ourselves it doesn't make sense, looking at our financial bills and being like, I won't be able to afford and support my family or support myself, or I won't be able to do things not even that I want to do, but that I need to do if I try and follow whatever this nudging from God is. What would you tell somebody that's struggling to say yes to God?
I think it always comes back to there's power in prayer, I believe. There's going to be, I pray for peace that passes understanding. And I pray for confidence that is not my own, for strength that is not my own. Because when I sense that, then I know, then I have a sense of certainty that defies logic and reason. I think if, I empathize with people who are in that kind of tension of, I'm not sure if this is God calling me to make this kind of a sacrifice. It seems like it could do damage to, my family, other people, other things that matter. I believe that, He will walk us through that, and He will be patient with us. and he will bless us. The Holy Spirit will bring a peace that passes understanding when we are really ready to surrender. But we tend to sing I surrender all when really our hearts say I surrender some. And true, like, open palmed, relentless surrender to God is a discipline. It is a commitment, and I think it's a conviction that will just come the more that you are in tune and abiding with Christ and Jesus, and loving him more, and just wanting to follow his footsteps, echoing his character, echoing his ministry. It becomes not easier, but the pain is somehow numbed or managed by that supernatural peace. It's just such a blessing.
And that's it for another episode of the Auricle Podcast. Thanks for everyone who listened through to the end of the episode. Thank you, Pastor Rhoda, for your willingness and your vulnerability of just sharing your story. And thank you for encouraging me and whoever's listening just to say yes to God. I hope, and my prayer is for everyone, just whatever God is asking you to do, be bold and say yes, because if he gives you an idea, I promise you he'll carry you all the way through. So stay tuned for another episode. Hope you guys are all doing well, and just stay blessed. Ding, 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 ding.